Joyce?
Well, I lived in Crossroads, Clarence Park, suburb of Adelaide.
Centre of the
A
world.
close suburb of Adelaide. And actually it was my grandmother's house that she and her husband built, tried to build. And it was very tough going. My grandmother, Drummond, became a widow at 30. So poor old Nan had to go out to work at 30, leaving 6 children in the care of Grandma Donnelly, who apparently by all accounts was an absolute horror. She used to feed the kids castor oil on Friday night whether they wanted it or not. But my grandmother Drummond was also the local midwife. So a lot of the kids that I grew up with had all been delivered by my grandmother. Well, unfortunately I hardly knew her. She died when I was very young. But we thought she was gorgeous, my memories of her. She always had peppermint stuffed down her bosom. And so I guess that's
Her
where
cleavage,
that's where my liking for peppermints came in. But I can remember one of my memories of her walking along the beach, and we were lying on the sand and looking up at the sky, and she made up all these wonderful stories about the sky. And another time when I must have only been very small, we were trying to find mushrooms, as you did in Adelaide. You were out in the paddock somewhere, and Nan was dressed in red, and so she got chased by a bull, and we all ran for our lives. My father I think was born in Brighton, and he was sort of a local hero. He was a great sportsman, runner, footballer, cricketer, and
drinker,
and generally all-round good guy.
drinker.
To everyone else but us, because he was a bit of a bugger when he was home.
When he was pissed.
He wasn't. Anyhow, I can remember our early life in Clarence Park. We'd go off and ramble around for hours. We'd just take off. And you could sort of walk for miles, and one of our neighbours, Shirley Gray, used to take us walking, and we'd build a fire and she'd make damper. How we didn't burn down half of Clarence Park I'll never know, but that's what kids did in those days.
Is that Jimmy Gray's sister?
Yeah. Well, Mum was one of these very firm mothers. She believed in her children doing things like, as a great favour, we were allowed to wash up and wipe up. What a con, because we never stopped doing that. Also, from the time we were very little, she was on one side of the bed and we were on the other side of the bed making it, and which we did again from a very, very early age. And we always had chores to do before we went to school. We had to make our bed, tidy the room. I think Morris had to sweep the back veranda and Don had to sweep the front veranda, and Claire and I had to wash and wipe up. So when all those chores were done, I don't know what Mum did during the day. She was a great bookworm.
Describe a typical Friday night at the Linforth house when you were about late teens.
Well, it was a bit like mayhem, because we never ever knew who was going to turn up. My father always used to bring some of his pals home, and Mum had to, maybe the dinner was already dished out. She had to quickly scoop from one plate to another plate and make it extend and go around. But obviously it used to, because there were always 2 or 3, maybe 4 hangers-on with Morris and my father. they'd get into halts every now and again because I guess Morris was the young bull, my father the old bull, and they used to frequently have punch-ups. Well, they'd be punch-ups. They'd be swinging punch-ups at each other, which wasn't. So I could hardly wait to leave home and get away from that.
Well, I was courageous, being the white-headed boy. I got in between them. And they turned on me. We all ended up on the floor, and I think they broke my neck.
It's amazing how he's still here to tell the tales.
Oh God! I yelled. I think my neck's broken. And of course, that brought all the girls into the.
Yeah, and
Joyce
they got you up and apologised, dusted you off, and the fight was over.
Yeah, it was a great. I was a great fight breaker upper.
Go with it.
Well, when we were small in Adelaide, the big night out was to go to the markets, which still survive today, and they were fantastic. And we'd be in our pyjamas and so forth. Because my
But you
father always had a car.
car. Yeah.
He always had a car. I think he must have mortgaged the house, but he made sure he always had a car. So we'd go in, and I can remember walking round, and we'd get little licorice cigarettes. Walk round, we'd be pretending to be smoking these licorice cigarettes. And then my father decided that he would go to the war. So he left 4 small children with his wife and went off for the big adventure. So there was poor mum with 4 kids.
You went in
to
40.
go overseas.
Early 40.
We had quite a good time. My mother was always good as far as I could always invite whoever I wanted to home, and they could come and stay. Amy, my girlfriend, in those days, used to come and stay, and we'd have lots of laughs. We had a very stormy relationship with Morris because he was a boy. But,
He was the father.
what I said to him once, well, when Dad went away, did he say to you, you've got to be the man of the house and look after everyone? And he looked after us by punching us and didn't care where he punched you. So we were never, ever very fond of Morris. Claire and I had a very stormy relationship, and I guess as sisters do. But brother Don, he was always delightful. And his greatest joy was when he was about 15 or 16 that Morris never ever touched him again because he did jiu-jitsu. And so he flicked him once and that was it. Never laid a finger on Don again. So seeing he was about 4 years older, there was only 5 years difference between 4 of us.
Yes.
Never ever knew either of them because they died before we were even born.
So do you know what happened to them?
Well, I think my grandmother died of cancer, again leaving 6 children behind. 6. My father was the oldest, and then there were 3 girls and 2 boys. So, oh, we're keeping you up, Jim.
Go on.
The only really hilarious story that I can remember was, I think it was New Year's Eve, and I was expecting Meredith, and my father was away, and my mother gone out with some other friends, and anyhow, Dad came home, and Mum wasn't there, and so he was absolutely furious that she wasn't there. Anyhow, she eventually came home, and Dad came home and said there was a major Barney going on, and he started throwing all her clothes out of the wardrobe, and so I waddled in there and just said to him, "If you touch my mother," and he backed off at 1,000 miles an hour, and Claire came in, wringing her fingers and crying and carrying on, and I don't know exactly what happened then, but then Mum, Claire and I went out into the kitchen and we laughed and laughed and laughed. We just about laughed ourselves sick because it was so funny, because Dad, instead of being the bully, just said, everything will be all right, keep calm, keep calm. Because I'm sure he thought I was going to have the baby on the spot.
Which would be Meredith.
Yeah.
Your father's name?
Claude Albert Charles Linforth.
And your mother's name?
Frances Gladys Mavis. Well, her maiden name was Drummond. Frances Gladys Mavis Drummond. Married Linforth.
Tell us about Pop and Linda Wanham.
Oh, sex and sin in the big city.
I think they were having an ongoing affair for years and years, which actually suited my mother very well. It meant that she could go away on holidays, and Dad would be happy looking after Linda, or Linda looking after him. So they worked out very well. She went off to Tasmania with friends, and Western Australia, and all over the place. She had a ball.
What did Frank Wanham think of this?
Well, I think he was fairly spineless, and probably suited him just as well, because Linda was pretty feisty sort of lady, and she would have got stuck into him, so it probably suited him too.
So were your father and Linda Wanham, how long were they an item for, do you think?
I haven't got a clue, Andrew.
Well, they had a place together at Victor Harbour.
They
Yeah,
had
they
a
were
holiday
building
house
it.
together.
But
It
I
was
was
a
getting
Gulwa.
on with my own life.
It was Gulwa. I'll tell you about my dad. The Depression, the first 1930, the Depression. My dad was he was an ex-First World War digger, worked in the Melbourne Tramway Trust as a fitter, and as a fitter meant that they went round the cable cars, cable trams, doing maintenance on the cables and on the engines that drove the cables. And we always lived close by. So when he'd get a transfer, we'd immediately have to move house and so on. So I remember we were living in Fenwick Street, Northcote. Just up the road was the cable car drive machine, a big brick shed, and if the cable broke, they used to have what they call the marriage of the cables, and the management used to put an 18-gallon keg in the workshop for the blokes when the cable had been remarried. And remarrying is what they call a long splice, and it's a very intricate process of joining the cable together such that it doesn't change the diameter of the cable. This is extremely interesting information for those people who are some cable cars, such that.
Well, okay, this is a very small audience. It's your family, and there's no one in your family that has any interest in cable cars.
My father did.
Well, who was your father?
James Patrick Lynch.
And tell me about it.
Well, he was a digger from the First World War. Came from Warwick Nabil, or Minyip actually, which is close to Warwick Nabil. They were on a property, and it's called the Little Desert. Out there is called the Little Desert. And they tried to grow wheat on this 640 acres, a square mile of land. He's one of 5, 4 boys and a girl.
Do you remember their names?
Yep.
What were their names?
Bert, Jack, Russell, Bert, Jack, Roy,
Bert?
May was the girl. Roy was the youngest one. Bert, Jack, and Jim. Yeah, that's right. No, I didn't remember my paternal grandfather, because he's the bloke that shot through.
Where did he go?
No one ever knows to this day. Well, he shot through. He had owned a pub in Geelong, in Victoria. After they left the property, they went to Geelong and lived in Geelong.
Your maternal grandfather?
Yeah, well, that was Tom Cowan.
Well, tell me about him.
Well, he was a timber getter from Warburton, and they lived at Yarra Junction, which is just up down the river, the Yarra River, from Warburton, about 3 mile. And he had a timber mill there, and they sawed the timber and they dragged the timber down from Warburton down to Yarra Junction. He was a dear old fellow, big, tall, strong, lean fellow with a big moustache, Ballarat birdie moustache. Loved his beer, loved his whiskey. And then he came down to Richmond and started at a joinery shop, manufacturing furniture. And
What was that called?
Standard Furniture Company. Oh, I just know him as
Grandpa.
Grandpa Cowan. Grandpa.
His full name was Thomas Jeremiah Cowan. That's what you've told me.
Oh, I might have told you that. I can't remember now. I think that Jeremiah might be a bit of a figment. I can't remember. And old Grandma Cowan. She was, I think, might have been Mary. I don't know. I cannot remember her name. Dear old sausage. I've got the photo of her. Yeah.
Yes.
Big, heavy old lady.
What, with the veranda of breast?
Oh, yeah. Oh, like Joyce. Yeah.
No, thanks, Jim. I think a little more than that. Yeah, you should shrink. What do you think?
You owe me $100, Joyce. Look on it. You'd pay me in 5-cent pieces as soon as you've got the money available.
Well, I won't have any 5-cent pieces in a long while.
No, well, you'll just have to acquire them, my Joyce.
Mm.
You are indebted to me for life.
I know that. I know that's a fact. Indebted for more than my life.
And no, not your life. Life in toto.
Oh, well, fancy that. Little Toto. I thought that was the name of a dog.
Mm.
Isn't that the name of the dog in the Wizard of Oz?
Yep.
Little Toto.